to the hallway outside. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar. Councilmember Reyes is ill. I'm joined today by Councilmember Krikorian, who's walking up to the public mic, and will be seated shortly. So with that, thank you very much. And on consent today is item number 8, unless we have speaking cards, but okay. 8 is on consent, 9 is on consent, and 11 is on consent. With your concurrence, Mr. Krikorian,
that's fine, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Those on consent. And so with that, if we could start the agenda, and if we could begin with item number 12, and if our staff could read that item into the record, please.
Sure, Council members. Item 12 is the Director of Planning's weekly report.
Good afternoon, council members. Mike LeGrand, Director of Planning. One thing I wanted to highlight for you in report is that the department has kicked off the workings of a mobility element, which is an element of the general plan, commonly called the transportation element, to look at our different modes of transportation, our new transit lines, and really set a constitutional framework for all the city departments to follow as we move forward with our investment in Measure R, as well as our new bus lines and our roadway elements. Not only is this good for us to, as a city, plan ahead for the future of our transit mobility issues, it's also very helpful in terms of applying for federal and state grants, having a cohesive voice when we look at transit issues. But furthermore, it helps streamline the development process. Many times we're faced with road designations that require street widenings in neighborhoods that may have historic structures, and the city would never be able to actually get those widenings in, but we have to go through a discretionary process case by case to address those. Similar to what we did downtown 2 years ago, we'd be able to actually revise those street standards to be the streets that we want them to be. In some areas, that means wider sidewalks, less roadway capacity. In other areas, we need the capacity for traffic purposes. That's a real more fine-tuned approach to looking at the streets and how we utilize them for multiple modes of transportation, including bicycles and pedestrians, rather than just the cars we currently do. So we're excited to start the work on that. It'll be a multi-year program. We would like to thank the City Council for funding the first year of this program, and we look forward to working with you on this in many important endeavors.
Thank you very much, Mr. LeGrand, for your report. Any questions or comments? Mr. Krikorian?
I just want to tell you I'm really excited about this because it's very frustrating, I think, for a lot of people to see these streets that get wide and then get narrow, get wide and then get narrow, knowing that that street widening is never going to get completed, and yet we continue to do that as a routine, and it's not contributing to mobility, and it's failing to utilize things that we could utilize, like, as you point out, wider sidewalks or bike lanes or any number of other things. So I think that this, dealing with it on a more community-based, in a more community-based way than a one-size-fits-all approach is absolutely the way to go, and so I'm looking forward to working with you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, and we assume you're going to be working with the Public Works divisions that work on that as well. We see some of these items come through our Public Works Committee, and although there's a lot of support sometimes to change the width of the streets, we're not looking at it comprehensively. We're looking at it project by project. So let's, I assume you're working with Public Works as they're designing their projects as well.
Correct. Public Works, as well as the Department of Transportation, and many community groups who have ideas about how they want those streets to work in their communities, and obviously the council offices, and we'll be looking to you for a lot of those groups you'd like us to reach out to.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to point out on item number 10, we have one speaker card. We were going to adopt that item under consent. The speaker is indicating on the card support. If you want to come up now, we could take care of this item. And my advice to people is always stop while you're ahead. You know, you could, you may raise something that raises questions for us. And
No, not at all. I'm here in support because I'm the current owner of the house. I'm not a descendant of Catalina Brent Pico, but I love the house, and I just wanted to thank the city for its preservation efforts, and appreciated the opportunity to be included on the list.
Great, thank you. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Mary Sheehan Rajwing.
Thank you very much. So with that, I think we could also place that item on consent with Mr. Curran's concurrence. That item will also move forward on consent. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 1, please.
Council members, item 1 is a communication from the mayor. It's relative to the appointment of Mr. Joseph Halper to the West LA APC.
Thank you very much. Is Mr. Halper here? Thank you, Mr. Halper, and welcome to the Planning, Land Use, and Management Committee. And if you could just state what are some of your goals and objectives serving on this commission, and you are being appointed to the West Los Angeles Area Planning Commission as recommended by the mayor.
As I read the purpose of that particular, of the Area Planning Commission concept, it was to bring the process down to the community level in a more effective way, and that would be my hope and my contribution.
Great, thank you very much. And a little bit of your background for the record, Mr. Halper.
I've been in public service for my entire career, mostly in the Parks and Recreation area. I have served as a statutory member of the Westchester County, New York Planning Commission as the Commissioner of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services for that jurisdiction. I also served as the chairman of the planning district in New York City, which was Westchester, which was Rego Park and Forest Hills area of the city in Queens. A secondary duty is my job as the Commissioner of Recreation for that city.
Well, thank you. I look forward to your service on this commission, and with your background and service at other cities, it certainly helps us to compare and get new ideas, and we may be doing things better, maybe not, but it's always great to have someone's perspective who comes from other jurisdictions. Any questions or comments from Mr. Krikorian?
I just appreciate Mr. Halper's willingness to serve. Thank you very much for being here and for your willingness to serve the city.
Thank you very much. And so with that, I'll recommend approval with Mr. Krikorian's concurrence and second, and we will forward this to the full council. The nominee, Mr. Halper, I think our mayor's office will guide you in the next steps. So I know they're here, so they will help you, let you know when it's going to go to full council and all that good stuff. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council.
Thank you very much. So moved, and without objection, we'll have that item to forward it to full council. Item number 2.
Item 2, council members, is a communication from the mayor. It's relative to a request to withdraw the nominee, Ms. Gabriela Sarabia, who has declined the appointment.
Okay, we will receive and file without objection. Next item.
Next item, council members, is a motion, Wizard LaBranche. It's instructing the planning department to convene a working group consisting of various city staff to report back in 30 days with recommendations to address the issue of illegal destruction of historic structures.
Thank you. Does the planning department have any comments or on this item? Anything that we need to raise? We hope to adopt this and forward it to begin the process on recommendations. But anything you want to share with us up front?
Ken Bernstein with the Office of Historic Resources and the Planning Department. We look forward to working with your office and the other city departments. Obviously, we are always concerned when there is illegal destruction of historic structures or portions of historic structures, and we look forward, under the leadership of your office, to coming up with some new tools that can deter such work in the future. We would mention, obviously, if we're happy to work on the task force and meet with your office. If this is something that would require significant policy development or new ordinances, it might be something where we might be coming back to you to ask for additional resources if significant policy development or new work is required.
Great, thank you. And you did state your name and title for the record, right?
I did. Ken
Okay.
Bernstein, Principal City Planner with the department.
Thank you. And the impetus came for this motion because of a historic structure on the historic corridor of Broadway. And as we were discussing with people in the historic preservation community, we realized that this is done more often than we think, where the consequences of destroying a potentially historic structure are not as great for some people, that they would just rather move forward and deal with the consequences. So we wanted to analyze whether it is increasing penalties or what other things we can do so that as people do their cost-benefit analysis in dealing with their historic structures, we may want to make it cost-prohibitive or other ways of not allowing people to continue to destroy our history in the city of Los Angeles. So any ideas you come back forth with this working group would be greatly appreciated. So we'll...
No, thank you. And again, we appreciate your leadership on this issue.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? So we will, with Mr. Corcoran's concurrence, adopt this item. Second by Mr. Corcoran, adopted. Next item.
Next item, council members, is a proposed ordinance being transmitted by the Planning Commission. It's to create a new supplemental use district, the modified parking district. And planning staff is present.
Thank you. Planning Department.
Good afternoon. Tom Rothman from the Code Studies section of the Planning Department. I'm here today to present a new ordinance, a proposed ordinance to add a new tool to our kit in our zoning code. It's to precipitate changing parking standards on a community level. The problem in the city is that we have uniform parking codes for the entire city, the whole 470 square miles, and we can't change parking standards across the board. So what we're looking at is creating a new supplemental use district that we can implement on a community level so we can change parking standards where the need is. For instance, we have, I'll just give you some examples of our parking standards that apply citywide. Restaurants, cafes, and coffee shops require one parking space for 100 square feet of floor area. Retail requires one space for 250 square feet. Offices are one per 500 square feet. Auditoriums are one space for 5 fixed seats. Hospitals require one space for 2 beds. Single-family homes, 2 spaces. Apartments have an odd combination of based upon habitable rooms. So when you have under 3 habitable rooms, you provide 1 space, 1.5 spaces for 3 habitable rooms, and then 2 spaces when you've got more than 3 habitable rooms. Parking is a big issue in the city. It affects housing affordability. It affects neighborhood character. It hurts in our competition for transit funds from the federal government. It also inhibits the growth of small businesses in certain communities. And also the fact that we change our parking standards on a project-by-project basis has created a very difficult way to know what the rules really are. So what we're trying to do here is change the rules in a community so we can really address the problems at hand. This new supplemental use district we're proposing has 7 tools that we think can really address most of the problems, so they can be applied one or more in each district. So the district would have to be set up. This is only the enabling legislation, so we're really just setting the shell up right now. The first tool is a change of use parking standards. Lots of our older neighborhoods, we cannot get new businesses in because older neighborhoods already are built out and the parking on site is there and that's all they have. So what we'd like to do is, in this instance, the change of use is to grandfather in the old parking standards but not require new parking standards. So for neighborhoods like downtown and Broadway, if there's 2 parking spaces for a furniture store that exists today, they want to redo it, upgrade it into a restaurant, they would not have to put in additional parking if that was the chosen option in that district. Also, another option would be, number 2, would be off-site parking. Right now, we do allow off-site parking for commercial and industrial uses up to 750 feet. We would like to expand that in one of these districts to up to 1,500 feet. So, and for all uses to include residential, not in addition to commercial and industrial. So in a district, 1,500 feet is the general term, general distance for a transit-oriented district, a good walking distance. So we wanted to expand it to 1,500 feet in a district that chose that option. Another tool would be a parking reduction permit to allow parking reductions on a case-by-case basis in one of these districts when certain transportation demand management measures were met. So right now, to get a reduction in parking, most applicants have to apply for a variance. Very difficult to get. They have to prove hardship. It really doesn't make much sense when you're talking about reducing parking. This option would actually further the conversation of what are the benefits from reducing parking and how are you going to help provide better transit in the city. The fourth option is to decrease parking standards. That's the biggest one in this ordinance. It's in a district, most likely around a transit-oriented district, you could reduce parking by however much the planner chooses, but there would have to be findings that be met. And I'll go into those findings a little later on in this presentation. Another tool would be to increase parking standards. This is something that's already in the code. It's not used very often. In fact, it's never been used, but I didn't want to remove it altogether. There may be certain circumstances where we'd like to see increased parking. So it's going to stay as one of the tools in the modified parking requirement district. The sixth tool is commercial parking credits. This is a kind of an innovative tool that we started several years ago in Eagle Rock, and it's now expanded to Atwater, where the parking requirements of a new business can be met by paying a fee to the city for underutilized on-street and off-street parking spaces. So that's been very, very effective in Eagle Rock, and it's starting to be effective in Atwater. And the last tool is maximums, parking maximums. Instead of having a minimum, have a maximum, no more than. That's being used in many other cities across the country. I'm not really sure what neighborhood would be a perfect model for that in LA right now, but I think it's helpful to have it in our toolkit to be used at a later date. Okay, so those are the 7 tools. I don't know if I can repeat them very quickly. One is a change of use parking standards to grandfather them in, allow off-site parking, allow a new parking reduction permit, decreasing parking, increasing parking, commercial parking, and maximum standards. Now remember, they can only be used one or in tandem. Obviously, they all can't be used because they would contradict one another. Supplemental use districts, we have many of them in the city. This would just be another one in our toolkit. We've got them for equestrian districts, community design overlay districts, fence height districts. So this would just be another district that could be used in certain communities. And to establish one in the city, it can either be established by the city council, the city planning commission, the director of planning, or a private applicant could apply for a new parking district. In order for an applicant to apply, they would need to present the boundaries to the city planning commission, and they would need to have 75% of the property owner's signatures on the application. That's not just the rule for this supplemental use district, but for all of them. That's the general legislative procedures. And now I'm going to talk about the findings. The findings needed to establish one of these would be, there's 2 findings that are required for all legislative acts that are done by the City Planning Commission. That's finding how what its relationship to the general plan is and how it is implementing the general plan. And the other one is the conformity with the public necessity, convenience, and general welfare. Those are the 2 basic findings for establishing a new district. And then we're going to add 2 more findings. The finding that we've added, it's in the ordinance in front of you today on draft C5, is that the strategies included in the district are appropriate considering such factors as local transit dependency and automobile usage, traffic, available parking, level of transit service, and the goals, policies, and objectives set forth in the applicable community plan. So we won't want to leave anybody out. We want to make sure that there's a very comprehensive outreach and stakeholder involvement. In addition, what we wanted to do is add a new finding. That finding I read is already in the ordinance. There's a new finding that we wanted to add for the record today, and that would be that the parking reduction taking into account impacts such as parking overflow and increased traffic congestion, and potential benefits such as enhanced mobility and neighborhood vitality, shall not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood. That's a new finding that was garnered with lots of stakeholder and community input. So what the planning department thinks the benefits are is that we're going to be able to change our parking standards on a community-wide basis, and by doing so, we're going to be expanding the options for siting buildings. Many projects are very difficult to build when you have to do the on-site parking. We have small lots in some of our denser neighborhoods. When you've got to provide the parking on-site, it makes it very, very difficult and very, very expensive. So at least allowing it to be off-site in certain neighborhoods would really help ease up the cost of construction. It'll help us to be ahead and plan ahead of our transit as it expands throughout the city, so we can have transit-oriented parking districts as the transit goes in, as opposed to playing catch-up like we have tended to do. And we want to protect the character of our older neighborhoods. We think that by several of these tools, instead of knocking down buildings and building new construction that provides the parking, we can save the character of our older neighborhoods. That was the intent of the Eagle Rock commercial parking credits program, and we think we can do that in other neighborhoods with this program. Then I'm going to go into a few changes that we've added to the ordinance since it was originally seen by the City Planning Commission, and then I'll ask for some questions. We did add that we cannot implement one of these parking districts in an existing specific plan. That was new language that has been added. The original ordinance said 3 acres. We're expanding that to either 2 entire block faces, 1 entire block, or 5 acres. So it's gotten a little bit larger. And we have also said that rent-stabilized units cannot take advantage of any decreases in parking standards. This was an issue that was raised by several of the housing advocacy groups, saying that if we decrease parking even on a community level, it might cause unintended consequences of, now that the parking has been lowered, older units could convert to condos, being that the only thing that was inhibiting them previously was that they didn't have enough parking. So if there was 1 parking space per unit in an older building, and now to have a condominium you need 2 or 2 1/4 spaces, if we lowered that parking standard, now they would have the required parking, and they could convert to a condominium. So that's something we really don't want to see. So we're going to preclude or accept rent-stabilized units from taking advantage of any reductions in parking. We've also added a piece that says that any building that has taken advantage of the SB 1818 affordable housing component based upon a parking reduction, those parking standards must remain lower than any reduction in parking. So that's really to make sure that we don't undermine our own policies in the city, that we don't create the same alternative so that developers are no longer encouraged or incentivized to create affordable units. So that balance will remain the same. So we're basically, if it gets lowered, they get lowered in step. Is that clear? So right now, if you say an applicant would like to build a building and provide less parking as an incentive to put in affordable housing, and they go down to 1 unit per parking space, and the general requirement would be 1 unit for 2 parking spaces. If we reduced the level in that district to, say, 1.5 parking, or let's say 1 per 1, then the number of parking spaces for the affordable would also have to come down. That level hasn't been determined yet in this ordinance, but if it goes down to 1.5 or to 1 for the standard, then the affordable would have to be at 1/2 a parking space. So there would still be the incentive to put in affordable housing based upon a parking reduction, so that they go down in steps. And that's really it. I did add some findings for neighborhood protections, and I did want to add one change to 1315H to read that no modified parking requirement districts shall have the effect of reducing the incentives provided by the SB 1818 and other laws and ordinances to induce market rate developers to provide affordable units.
It's one recommended change. Okay.
So those were the two changes. Yes. Charlie Roush, Planning Department staff. I just wanted to clarify one of the amendments that Mr. Rothman suggested on a finding, and that's on finding F4C1. That was the change that he referred to, that the parking reduction take into account impacts such as parking overflow, increased traffic, etc. I just wanted to make sure that the city clerk knew in working on this that findings number 2 and 3 would remain in the ordinance. So just want to make that clarification.
Thank you. So we have a number of cards. That conclude your presentation? Yes.
Yes, I'll answer questions.
Go to public comment right now, and then we'll open it up for committee questions and comments. We have 2 members of CD6 who are here, Brian Gavidia and Daniel Skudink. Welcome.
Okay, I guess I'll speak first. Little change of pace. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Daniel Skolnick.
Do you prefer to speak at the end of the public comment?
I'm comfortable. I can give that courtesy to the public. I can do that. Thank
Just
you.
want to double check. Okay, thank you very much. Let's do that. And you also have Daniel Skudink here from CD6 as well?
It's actually a constituent who lives in CD6.
Oh, okay, but he's not from CD6 office. Okay.
Right.
Gotcha. All right, so the first speaker is Lucille Saunders.
Good afternoon, council members. Lucille Saunders from the La Brea Willoughby Coalition, and I've been involved in all the hearings throughout, and I'm glad to see the refinements on this ordinance. Especially that the area has been increased from 3 to 5 acres, and that negative impacts of overflow onto residential areas are going to be part of the findings. I have asked for comprehensive summaries or current reports or data from the outcomes of districts that have already been established and that are used as models for this ordinance. I've not gotten these from the city nor from private parties which I've asked. What I have seen are initial studies which were snapshots that established the project. I mean, the wherever they've already been established. You have my letters on the things that we would also like to see, and especially on notification. Since the off-site parking location can be 1,500 feet, it seems to suggest that there may be a 1,500 feet impact, perhaps a negative impact into the neighborhoods, and we have asked for some sort of notification to be put into this ordinance. In addition to the regular 500 feet, those areas that would be impacted ought to be notified. Also, on any subsequent or additional further changes, once a district has been established, there's no form of notification. Is that, am I clear on that?
Yes, we'll ask the department to clear that up through this process. Thank you very much. Jack Allen. After Jack Allen is Mott Smith.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Jack Allen, president of the Palisades Preservation Association. The planning board said that this item was for discussion, but it's hard to discuss such a complex ordinance in 2 minutes. So I have submitted to you a letter setting forth the reasons, detailing the reasons that this ordinance should be sent back to the council, back to the planning department. First, a variance is a variance no matter what name you call it. This ordinance creates a way to increase the number of required parking spaces, a way to decrease the number of parking spaces set forth in the zoning requirements. First, by without making findings required by the city charter section 562 regarding variances. Second, this ordinance will increase the spillover parking into neighboring residential areas. 5 of the strategies available do not require a finding that there will be no spillover or increased traffic congestion as a result of creating the district. And I'm not taking it the one that on the reduced parking, because he just said that, and I haven't had a chance to even look at it as none of us to see what its impact. But I still think those findings can be easily gotten around. So I'm still concerned that they're going to result in spillover parking. And no applicant needs to, so that's important. Third, the ordinance is bad for business, especially small businesses, which businesses to locate in LA. Why would a business locate in LA when they can go to Orange or Ventura counties and get convenient parking for customers, clients, and their employees? And they'd have to put up with all this. If they're in a shortage of parking in the building, they don't have to put up with it. Fourth, a lot of affordable housing will be demolished despite the exception in the ordinance of rent-controlled housing. Fifth, the district can be justified if it's approximate to public transit. But the ordinance does not specify how close that transit must be. 1,500 feet or 5 city blocks? You expect people are going to walk 5 city blocks? What happens if the public transit line is eliminated or rerouted or service reduced? Is the district abolished and the owners made to provide the required parking? We think not.
Mr. Allen, if you could please wrap up.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. The only ones that will benefit from this ordinance will be the growth gang who don't care a damn about the quality of life in LA, but for their pocketbook. So don't make us go to the voters again like we had to do on Prop U to try to improve the quality of life in the city.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, after Mott Smith is Candido Mares.
Good afternoon. My name is Mott Smith, and I'm here today as a board member of the California Infill Builders Association, an organization of builders and environmental advocates who are fighting for better, more sustainable city development policies. And I just want to congratulate the city on its leadership in coming up with a way to get around the one-size-fits-all parking requirements that have absolutely hobbled business growth in Los Angeles, that have kept neighborhoods from really being able to deal with their parking issues, and have kept the planning process wrapped up in a bunch of questions that frankly take up staff time and keep them from working on frankly more important things. You're very wise to approach the ordinance as you have, as an enabling ordinance that allows neighborhoods to set their own requirements, as opposed to trying to put a new set of one-size-fits-all standards across the city. I've seen across the state of California and across the U.S., cities try to make blanket one-size-fits-all changes, such as eliminating parking requirements entirely, instituting parking maximums, and doing all of these things on a citywide basis. And invariably, there are unacceptable unintended consequences. By making the ordinance, as you have, an enabling ordinance that makes it easier for neighborhoods to access the tools that are currently now available only to communities with specific plans and other special use districts, you're really empowering both residential communities and commercial communities to determine their future and to create a better urban paradigm going forward. So, congratulations.
Mr. Smith, if I could ask you a question. I know you were involved in the Eagle Rock's parking credit program. Yes. How's that working?
Well, it's the opinion of the community that it's working out quite well. In fact, the recently passed president of Terra, the Eagle Rock Association, wrote a letter to City Watch LA talking about how pleased they are that it allowed them to get exactly the sort of businesses they wanted in Colorado Boulevard opening up. Prior to the parking credits ordinance, basically people trying to open up restaurants and cafes and businesses like this only had the option of going through a potentially 2-year variance process that you could afford if you were a corporate giant, but you couldn't afford if you were a mom-and-pop business. As a result, a lot of vacancies were appearing on Colorado Boulevard, and when people were able to assemble property, they could build Walgreens and other strip centers and the sorts of things that were out of character with what the community wanted. This ordinance allowed them to take the existing parking they have and turn it over to the sort of small business growth that they want to see. I should say, in all fairness, there are things that could be improved on the Eagle Rock model. I think it needs to be coupled with active parking management by DOT. I think that's an important missing piece, but I think that that's something that actually this ordinance addresses by requiring a finding that there actually are parking management tools in place.
Thank you very much. Candido Marez. After Candido is Glenn Bailey.
Good afternoon, council members. Candido Maris, Van Nuys Neighborhood Council. Along with me is Roland Guevara, and Van Nuys Neighborhood Council, John Camara with the Neighborhood Council, and Angel Nahar, who has worked since he was 5 years old to help improve Van Nuys Boulevard. We're here today to ask you to give us the tools to renew, rebuild, and revitalize Van Nuys. For too long, we've seen Van Nuys deteriorate. For too long, we've worked and struggled to give life back to the boulevard, and it just hasn't happened. With these tools, especially item 1, the change of use parking, I think we can bring about some great changes. For 2 years, we worked with the restaurant Tres Hermanos to bring them on board and on Van Nuys Boulevard, and it was a difficult road. We're working with other restaurants. There's a gentleman out in Canoga who invests and is looking for a place on Van Nuys, but the parking situation is such a cruel thing, and as it's been stated, a one-fit-all plan doesn't work for the city anymore. And as you called it, he also called it a uniform policy. We need to change that. We need to be more innovative. And I think if we allow communities to have more determination as far as what takes place in the community, we can really renew, rebuild, and revitalize this great city. So we ask you for the support, and we look forward to rebuilding this great city. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Glenn Bailey, before we go on, I do want to state that item number 7, we did not take action. We're going to continue that item. For those of you who are waiting for item 7, that is a report relative to the draft ordinance on the time cycle of the off-site sign periodic inspection program. We've been requested to continue that item, so if anyone's here waiting on that item, with the concurrence of Mr. Krikorian, we'll continue that item. I forgot to take action on that. So, okay, thank you.
Could you change that to number 5, item number 5? I'm Glenn Bailey.
You want to speak on item 5?
5, not 4.
Okay.
Yeah, apologize.
Okay, gotcha. Tracy Chavera. After Tracy Chavera, Jim McQuiston.
Good afternoon, Tracy Chavera, Central City Association. As you know, CCA is a business membership organization whose 450 members employ over 350,000 people in the Los Angeles region. While we do citywide advocacy, our focus is on downtown and the revitalization of downtown. CCA enthusiastically supports the creation of a modified parking district. In a city as varied as Los Angeles, urban development often suffers as a result of a one-size-fits-all approach. In the past couple of decades, LA has invested billions of dollars in public transportation, and it's time for the city to refine its tools to enable the city to work in partnership with neighborhoods and come up with parking standards that truly reflect local demand. We'd like to thank the Planning Department under the leadership of Michael LeGrand for bringing CCA to the table and including our expert input. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jim McQuiston. After Jim McQuiston, Wendy Sue Rosen.
Jim McQuiston. You all have my statement. I did suggest one extra sentence to being added to one of the things for public safety. You know, I'm on the CPAB and just west of here, and we're having a lot of trouble. People standing, waiting for buses, getting robbed. And I am worried about people working at night, having to walk long distances, and so that's why I put that in. But I do want to say also, we had maybe the granddaddy of them all, the SNAP, the Vermont Western Station Neighborhood Plan, and we have limits on amount of parking, and we had reduced parking requirements and all that. And what happened was, that was about 10 years ago, and no one will build without a variance to those, no one. And so we just stopped all of our development in our area. And I did want to say it is a difficult thing to worry about with parking. Probably this local area is a good idea, but we'll see. I think you might want to look at the SNAP to see what the results are. We're very disappointed in it.
Thank you. Wendy Sue Rosen. After Wendy's Louis Becker.
Good afternoon. My name is Wendy Sue Rosen, and I'm here to represent Brentwood Residents Coalition. I want to just start by talking about how this ordinance has really changed since it was first presented to the community. We were pretty surprised when we saw this ordinance in the beginning. It was very, what seemed to us, lopsided. There already was an ordinance similar in the code, which had findings and protections for the neighborhoods. And when this ordinance came out of planning, those were all stripped out of the ordinance. We have worked with the planning department, and they have been so responsive to the community's needs. They worked with the housing department. They put on a workshop for the community and architects and developers. This has been through a lot of discussion, a lot of change, and what I think you have before you is really the best of the balance for an ordinance. The reason that today Tom Rothman talked about a change to the finding is because when we got to the City Planning Commission, they felt that one of the findings was so restrictive, it would be very difficult for that finding to be met. And in order for this ordinance to be as flexible as it really needs to be, we worked with the planning department to come up with a new language that was proposed today. So what I'd just like to say is thank you to the planning department for taking this ordinance from where it began and balancing it so that the community side and the development side can come today and say, we support this ordinance exactly as presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Louis Becker. After Louis Becker is Barry Johnson.
Hi, my name is Lois Becker, and I came downtown today to support the ordinance as the City Planning Commission approved it, including the new finding the Commission requested. I don't want to see any omissions that might compromise the work that has been done in collaboration between planning and members of the public to ensure adequate protections for our residential neighborhoods. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Barry Johnson. After Barry Johnson is Will Wright.
Barry Johnson, Studio City. I agree with what the first speaker said in regards to additional notification beyond the 500-foot limit. I believe if it's a 1,500-foot line, that there should be a 500-foot radius anywhere along that 1,500-foot line. We have many single-family residential neighborhoods adjacent to business districts where without this notification they would have no idea of impending parking changes in their neighborhoods. The other thing I hope this ordinance does not do is ever shrink parking spaces. It takes a smart car as it is now to fit in most compact, quote-unquote, compact spaces in this city and not get your sides of your car dinged. So going smaller on parking spot width is the absolute worst thing we could do for a car owner, maybe the best for body shops. And the final thing I was just curious about, I am assuming this ordinance in no way would affect parking requirements along any specific plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Will Wright. After Will Wright, Hillary Norton.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Will Wright. I work with the American Institute of Architects to register our strong support for this ordinance. It's been a great process. Really want to compliment planning and the staff that they've, the outreach. You have our letter of support here, and just to sort of mention a few things, because this really is about making communities more walkable and more livable, and this is an ordinance that really allows the city to have more flexibility to custom tailor parking requirements to suit the neighborhood's needs best. Overall, well-balanced parking requirements facilitate sustainable urban infill. Mott Smith spoke well to that. They lower the cost of housing and development in general. They enhance the accessibility of neighborhoods serving public amenities. This really is about making walkable neighborhoods. Many of us no longer have cars. Many of us look to walk to places, and if there's a parking lot between where I'm walking to and where I'm walking from, that means I'm walking that much further. We really are moving away from our cars. I think you can agree to that with the transit investments we're making. Well-balanced parking requirements also disincentivize excessive driving and encourage pedestrian behavior. They foster opportunities to promote environmental conservation. They help lower the heat island effect, and they help prevent auto-related pollutants from entering our air, rivers, and oceans. So that is why we are supporting this enabling ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Hillary Norton. And I must say, when I saw your title here, well, the organization you represent, the first time I read it as Fast Flying Angelinos Stuck in Traffic. But it's FAST, which stands for Fixing
That
Angelinos
is a
Stuck in
solution to our
Traffic.
traffic, is personal flying machines. So, my name is Hillary Norton, and I am the Executive Director of FAST, Fixing Angelinos Stuck in Traffic. And I'm speaking to you not only as the Executive Director of FAST, but as an 18-year resident of Eagle Rock, because I really want to commend the Planning Department, not only for creating such a well-balanced ordinance, as Wendy Sue Rosen said, but also for having that teach-in that I thought was one of the most interesting discussions about parking and how we can balance community needs with new business. The reason that FAST, an organization dedicated to solving traffic in the short term with a coalition of over 2 million students, businesses, and others, we are here to speak very strongly for this as a toolkit. That's all it is. It's just a toolkit that allows creativity by communities as well as development. I'm pleased to say that the Eagle Rock model worked so well because it was brought by the community, not by business owners. It was brought by the community when we wanted to see that the storefronts weren't going to go vacant. It was a coalition of the homeowner group, which I was president of at the time, the ERCPR, and the Chamber of Commerce. But the goal was specifically to help small business. And Will Wright is absolutely right. It encouraged walking, bicycling. The countdown crosswalks were one of the best things that ever happened. And we saved neighborhood trips so that we could open our community up for the rest of the city. And Eagle Rock, over and over again, makes the cover of the Los Angeles Magazine as a brave new neighborhood that has new restaurants, is walkable, and is community oriented. And this ordinance itself is part of the toolkit that made it so. So we thank you for an ordinance that creates community character as well as manages parking and incentivizes creative solutions to transportation, which is what FAST stands for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Daniel Slotnick. After Daniel is Jeff Jacobberger, and then Brian Gavidia, and that will...
Councilmember, if we could allow for Brian, our constituent who actually wrote down CD6, to speak
Sure.
first. Thank you. Do you have that card still?
Oh, I see.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Gavidia, and I am a constituent from the Van Nuys area, particularly in Sylvan Street. And I am supporting this parking ordinance primarily because I want to see my community flourish. I want it to be like a city like Pasadena where we could have parking and we could have the ability to walk to like what it is an outside mall. I believe that this is something that will be good for our community, good for our youth, good for business, bringing in jobs. And also, I have been seeing that unfortunately, due to this lack of parking management and parking things, there has been negatively business just like marijuana dispensaries that are coming into our neighborhood and bail bond agencies that don't look attractive to our neighborhood. So I think this ordinance will serve good for community beautification and for business, and overall it's a good idea. And I thank the planning department for coming up with this ordinance, and I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker.
Thank you, council members. Daniel Skolnick from the Office of Council Member Tony Cardenas. While LA's parking policies certainly address the majority of the city's parking needs, these policies do not provide the best policy for neighborhoods with unique development characteristics. The implementation of these tools, particularly change of use, will help create new jobs by providing permit streamlining and cutting the red tape or variances, which oftentimes dissuade new business from coming into our communities. The implementation will allow for older communities such as Van Nuys to reactivate their storefronts and allow for community-serving uses. As you can see, there's support from community members for restaurants and retail and markets and other sort of neighborhood-serving uses that currently we don't have because only offices can afford to fit into many of our retail spaces in the Van Nuys Central Business District. The implementation also helps reduce blight. When you have these vacancies, landlords struggle to find a tenant, and they end up putting in less savory uses, as you heard. But lastly, coupled with parking demand management techniques, which LADOT worked very hard on, and the implementation of our 5-year plan, what we can see is a better use of our city assets. We have a number of city-owned parking facilities throughout the city, and I know in Van Nuys we've built very expensive underground parking that only has about a 30% utilization during peak periods. So this is about creating jobs, using our existing assets, and giving new life to older communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Jeff Jacobberger.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Jacobberger. I'm on the board of the Mid-City West Community Council, which includes Melrose Avenue, the Fairfax District, the Miracle Mile, West 3rd Street, really great pedestrian-oriented streets. And we struggle, spend most of our time on our land use committee dealing with parking issues and dealing with how you figure out how you get changes of use, allow restaurants and new businesses to come into existing built environments where there's not a lot of on-site parking. I personally, I'm speaking only on my own behalf, but strongly support this ordinance because what it really does is allow neighborhoods like mine to come up with parking tools and parking systems that really work and are designed for our own neighborhood rather than trying to sort of force a round peg into a square hole. We get to, develop an oblong hole and an oblong peg. And other neighborhoods can have triangular pegs and triangular holes, and everybody gets to do what really fits for their neighborhood, rather than trying to say that there's one policy that is applicable across this entire city of 4 million people. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let me first start off by saying that I fully support this approach and moving forward with this item. There have been many a times in some of the commercial quarters in my district where there are people willing to open up a coffee shop, make use of a historical structure or to provide for new business activity in these quarters, but it comes down to those stringent parking requirements that we've always had. But in this approach, I think it provides some flexibility in looking at several ways of addressing that problem. It's not just saying, okay, we're going to give you a variance, or we're going to waive those requirements. And that's always comes down to a negotiated discussion that it could happen for one person in one building, but not the other. And this, I think, is going to allow the flexibility to find that balance with the local neighborhood. And on Colorado Boulevard, where we have implemented the parking credit program, it has allowed for more businesses to open. At the same time, there are some fixes that need to be made, as was suggested by by Mott. But we also, I think, as we move forward, need to be cognizant of some of the impacts this may have on the local neighborhoods, and assure that while we want our business corridors to flourish and provide more amenities and shopping opportunities and create more jobs, we do need to find that balance with the local neighborhoods. One of those is notification, which some of the public speakers raised, and I want to pose that question to the department. Do you think there is sufficient notice in here for local neighborhoods to be aware of the changes, should there be some, or do we need to do more or less on this item with respect to notification?
For the record, currently we have a 500-foot notification for legislative actions, zone changes, supplemental use districts of any type within the zoning code. That is the standard notification. And then, of course, we also provide notification for neighborhood councils. We get the word out. I think that if we went beyond that current notification for the myriad types of entitlements we have, I mean, certainly that would set a precedent. It's not clear to the department that notification beyond what we use for every other type of procedure and entitlement is warranted in that case.
Okay.
Certainly there would be, the cost would be, and the delays would be considerable.
Great. Okay, thank you. Mr. Krikorian, any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think any steps that we can take to provide greater flexibility are generally a step in the right direction. We have 95 different neighborhood councils in this city because we have many communities with many different interests. The parking concerns of Van Nuys are not the same as the parking concerns of Venice. So I think that that's important, and I appreciate the comments that you just offered on notification. One question I have on that, on the neighborhood council notification, is would all of the neighborhood councils within the area, the impacted area, including the 500-foot notice, be given notification?
Yes, that is correct. We work hand in hand with the neighborhood councils to make sure that all of the neighborhood councils that are affected are notified. We have a neighborhood liaison. It's a very simple matter of providing that notification and working very closely with those interest groups and the neighborhood councils.
Okay, thank you. So, given that this is a community-based approach that's an option, I think that it's a good one. I still had a couple of concerns. One being that a private application could be submitted. It could be in a commercial area that abuts a residential area. 75% of the private application area would certainly be supportive, but across the street, people would certainly be opposed. I think you've addressed that concern with the new change that would require an additional finding that the surrounding area would not be impacted. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. And also the size of it would be, I would imagine it would be very difficult for one applicant, given that it's got to be 2 complete block faces, an entire block, or 5 acres. I mean, it's possible, but then I would imagine an applicant would save a lot of money by just applying for a variance than a very costly supplemental use district that would apply only to one property. It doesn't seem likely, but again, it would be possible. If he's the whole block, he would be the whole 75%, but notification would have to be given out no matter what. So I don't know what would be the benefit of that.
Thank you. I also have a little bit of a concern about the interface of this with SB 1818 in that I would be hesitant to want to give double bonus, if you will, which I think, as you've explained it, it does have that effect. On the other hand, as I understand it also, again, this is something that is an optional tool. If a particular community felt that that was valuable to have, they could do it. If they felt that it was that created a problem in their area, then they could reject this.
They could not. They could just not use that tool altogether. What the ordinance says right now is that the required parking for an affordable SB 1818 project must be lower than the decreased parking standard set forth for that whole neighborhood. It's fairly broad and open-ended, but it's just so that we maintain the SB 1818 incentive for affordable housing.
So in that circumstance, would the proponent still be required to make the finding then that the combined impact of this this policy with the SB 1818 reduction contained within that area would also not then have a spillover effect in surrounding areas?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. But yes, the SB 1818 additional reduction would have to be spelled out because this is not taking into consideration these. So in the specific enabling legislation, the new parking standards for the affordable units would also need to be 0.5 parking space per unit would have to be included in the specifics, and that would be part of what would need to be made of findings for. Is that
okay.
clear?
Yeah, I think so. So in other words, there can be kind of a domino effect. A new NPR is created. There's existing SB 1818 or future SB 1818 buildings that are going to be put in there. The finding would not just relate to the specific content of the NPR, the requirements of the NPR, but also the additional parking bonuses that would be provided under SB 1818.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Now, one last point. Mr. Johnson raised a particular pet peeve of mine, and that is the size of parking spaces. There's nothing in here that would allow a reduction in the standard size, even of compact spaces now. That's not
pet peeve of mine also.
That's not one of the tools in the toolkit that would be provided.
The dimensions of a parking stall are not included in this ordinance.
Very good.
You would have to change. That would have to be another code amendment because they are prescribed in the zoning code. We would have to come back and change the zoning code. But no, it's not an option here.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. And I just want to underline that this does not mean we are moving towards a direction of decreasing the number of parking requirements. It could go one way, it could go another. It's leaving it optional to fit a local community needs, the needs of a local community. And one final question on specific plans. Now, you stated that some of these would not apply within a specific plan jurisdiction. What is the thinking behind that?
What we are saying is that you will not be able to establish a modified parking requirement district within any portion of an existing adopted specific plan. The rationale is because many of our specific plans already have parking standards that deviate from the zoning code. You can do these things anyway. Specific plans are like, for all intents and purposes, a mini city. It's a zoning code unto itself. If we wanted to, if a neighborhood or a planner chose to implement some of these ideas, which I would encourage, they could just open up their specific plan and just add that to their parking standards. They don't need to have a specific plan on top of a supplemental use district on top of our zoning code. It would just, we really don't want to see that much.
And so specific plan areas do want to incorporate some of these ideas. It is a lengthy process, but it's just like anything else where they see some new way of doing conducting themselves. It is a lengthy process. Okay, great, thank you. So with concurrence of Mr. Krikorian, I would ask that we request the city attorney to prepare the ordinance and adopt the item before us today. There was one change made by the planning staff with respect to the SB 1818 item. I lost my specific language on that, but with that change, Mr. Krikorian.
It was the finding relative to parking impacts, spillover parking.
Okay. Mr. Krikorian, would you second that to move forward? Okay. So we'll request the city attorney to draft the ordinance, and it will be back before this committee before it goes to full council, correct? Yep. when that's ready. Yeah. Great, thank you very much. So moved. Next item.
Next item is item 5. It's again a draft ordinance transmitted by the Planning Commission to expand bicycle parking requirements that would be applicable to some multifamily residential developments and also to commercial and industrial and manufacturing uses.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Ry Berg with Department of City Planning Code Studies. I'm here to present the changes to the bicycle parking ordinance. As you know, the City of Los Angeles is currently seeking to expand bicycling as a mode of transportation within the city. And in 2010, the Bicycle Master Plan was passed. And this ordinance is primarily a implementation of the Bicycle Master Plan. It seeks to implement 10 different policies within that plan. And specifically, this ordinance seeks to address two concerns, and that is the lack of the quantity of bicycle parking and also the need for quality bicycle parking. So this ordinance expands the current requirements to cover multifamily residential buildings. It increases bicycle parking for commercial, institutional, and industrial uses. It requires bicycle parking in all city-owned buildings and parks. It amends the amount of car parking that can be replaced by bicycle parking. And it provides very clear siting and design standards, such as short-term and long-term bicycle parking, the size of a bicycle parking space, and other design standards such as that. And it requires that bicycle parking be visible and accessible and really designed in a manner that will encourage its use in all projects. So those are the basic points of the ordinance, and there are two amendments that we would like to make since the Planning Commission hearing. The first was requested by Building and Safety and the Department of Transportation, and that was specifically small changes to the wording regarding the procedure of business applying for a bicycle corral, and these are mostly just small wording changes just to make sure that those were clear and to strengthen it. And the second amendment was requested by the Planning Commission, and that was to amend the amount of bicycle parking that we're requiring in city parks. They wanted us to make sure that we captured pocket parks, those being parks under 2 acres. So we have made those small changes, and I can provide a copy of our changes to the city clerk.
Thank you. We'll go to public comment. First speaker is Alexis Lance. After Alexis is Barry Johnson's.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Alexis Lance. I'm the Planning and Policy Director with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition. And I am here today to strongly support the bicycle parking ordinance before you. We want to thank the Planning Department for their hard work on this effort, especially Rye for doing a lot of the research on this. The ordinance that currently exists has failed to provide the needed bicycle parking for both the people who currently bicycle and to be an invitation and an encouragement tool for the people who we'd like to see be bicycling. Providing short and long-term end-of-trip facilities for bicycles is a key infrastructure element needed to expand our mobility options and create a greener and more enhanced transportation system in Los Angeles. This ordinance will enhance our transit investments and ensure that transit-oriented development encourage tenants and visitors to use the transit being provided bicycles and walking to meet their daily needs, as it provides for developers the ability to swap car parking for bicycle parking within 1,500 feet of a transit station. Furthermore, we are very pleased to see bike corrals included in this ordinance. As Councilmember Huizar can attest to, they can be a wonderful asset to creating a more bike and walkable and economically lively neighborhood. And at the end of this, we want to really make sure that quality short and long-term bicycle parking is provided for all Angelinos who bicycle, and that you continue your efforts to enhance our transportation system and create a more equitable, sustainable, and bike-friendly Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry Johnson. After Barry Johnson is Hillary Norton.
Barry Johnson, Studio City. I just have one concern on this, and that is expanding the parking requirements to cover some multifamily residential developments. We're concerned in Studio City always about our areas where we have single-family homes across the street from multifamily developments. We have many areas like that. I also went to a city conference on this subject where other neighborhood councils were present from other parts of the city, and I heard similar things, particularly one from the USC neighborhood where there on one side of the street are these turn-of-the-century gorgeous homes and apartments across the street. And our premise is that parking in these for bicycles in these multi-families across from single families should not be allowed in the front yard of the multi-family units. It just adds clutter, and the single family folks who were there first have enough to deal with living across from multi-family, but adding clutter to the front yard is just something we shouldn't be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Hillary Norton. After Hillary Norton is Mott Smith.
Hi. I'm going to speak about the bike ordinance, but I just want to say in the parking ordinance that I did not sufficiently recognize you, Councilmember Weezer, for the work that you and your staff did for the Eagle Rock parking management project, so I just want to say that. I'm here to talk about the bike parking ordinance because FAST is also very supportive of this as a tool for car alternatives. We are not focused enough on making bike amenities as important, as convenient, and as gorgeous as we do for parking cars, and that's wrong. Bikes are a much more clean way of travel. They give us all a healthier lifestyle, and by creating this ordinance, we commend the planning department for elevating bike parking and bike amenities really to the level of car amenities. The parallels for 4 bike parking stalls to 1 car park stall is very important because it's now going to give developers and others an opportunity to understand the ratio and invest appropriately. We just want to thank you for making a very concurrent tool so that now that we can get bike on rail during rush hour, that we can have more office buildings make amenities for bikes part of the commute options that we all seek every day for a cleaner Los Angeles. Thank you very much. Oh, and we are part of the Mobility Hub program, so Bike Nation, Bike Station, Bike Connect is all part of our efforts to have bike parking and bike share at transportation hubs around the county. So we look forward to working with you and this ordinance to make it a better city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mott Smith, is he still here? No. Glenn Bailey. After Glenn Bailey is Jeff Jacobberger.
Good afternoon, council members. Glenn Bailey. I'm vice chair of the City of Los Angeles Bicycle Advisory Committee, and at its August meeting, the committee voted unanimously to support and recommend your approval of this bicycle parking ordinance. I do want to thank Rai for his outreach starting at the beginning of the year and coming to the BAC and keeping us posted. I appreciate that attention by planning department staff. So we've engaged in the process. So I think, he did a good comprehensive look at various aspects. Personally, it is discouraging when we're trying to encourage people to take those short trips, the 2 to 4 mile trips, and use a bicycle, only for them to show up at their destination, be it local neighborhood business, and there's absolutely no parking. Because some of the new construction, I'm thinking of some major chains now, are totally walled. There's nothing to put a chain around because it's a total straight wall. The landscaping is in pot, so there's a real need there, and this is new construction. We're not talking about old construction. So I realize this ordinance will only affect future construction, but I want to make a couple of points. First of all, the City of Los Angeles needs, in my opinion, the City of Los Angeles needs to set an example for the private development community. And so I in the past, 2 years ago, went to the Recreation and Parks Commission complaining to them about how many of the park facilities have had zero parking facilities for bicyclists coming to a park. Can you imagine that? They're trying to encourage recreation and neighborhood and people to come to the parks, and they had no bicycle parking. So they did do some action, but I just want to bring your attention, in the bicycle plan that you adopted earlier this year, there's 2 sections that require, as part of the plan implementation, my point, sorry, I know I'm over time, I want to ask, as part of your approval, hopefully your recommendation on this ordinance, that we'd also ask for a report back on the Program B, which is review of all city-owned, operated, and leased facilities for compliance with the city's bicycle parking standards. Increase bicycle parking to meet LAMC requirements where deficiencies are identified, so that we can have the city set a good example for the rest of the community. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Last speaker, Ben De Benedetto. Oh, I'm sorry. Skipped you, huh, Jeff?
Jeff
and then
Jakeberger.
Ben. Sorry about that.
I'm the 10th Council District Representative on the LA Bicycle Advisory Committee and speaking in strong support of this ordinance. One thing that hasn't, I don't know that has been mentioned, but, as the city, right now, parking meters can often serve as bicycle parking in a lot of places, but parking meter technology is changing where we're going more to bike parking meter stations. So what currently serves as bike parking, a lot of that is going to be going away over the next few years. So it's really important to actually get something in place that's going to add real bike parking in this city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How many syllables in your last name?
You did very well, actually. D. Benedetto, very good. Good afternoon. Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. Doesn't happen very often. My name is Ben Benedetto. I am a Studio City stakeholder. I'm also an elected member of the Studio City Neighborhood Council. And as so, I am the Transportation Chair. And although I wasn't here to speak on item number 5, I see that at the bottom of item number 5 it said that there were no submissions as far as community impact statements. And our Transportation Committee did take this up, agendize an item, and pass a motion, which was sent along. As Barry Johnson spoke earlier, he's part of our committee, and just to kind of reiterate what that motion was, from memory, it was we're pretty much in agreement with the ordinance and the way that it was written, except that we are concerned, as Barry said, with a lot of bicycle parking in front of R3 residences and any bicycle parking in front of R1 residences, and we suggested in our motion that bicycle parking be relocated to the rear side of buildings on R3, particularly on transportation corridors in the valley where you have streets like Witsit and Tahunga, where you do have single-family residences that are built in R3 zones next to apartment buildings, and there are walk streets and a lot of isolated community businesses, Tahunga Village and that kind of thing, make it very difficult with a lot of bicycles parked just in front. So other than that, we're pretty much in support of the ordinance. I'll find out what happened and why you didn't get it, but that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was our last speaker on this item, and this is, again, I want to thank the Planning Department for your work on this. It's more, I think this, along with the previous item, is advancing our opportunities to create more pedestrian-friendly, bicycle-friendly streets and allow for more commercial revitalization of neighborhoods, period. On this item, I also want to state I'm very happy to see some codification of how the city can move forward with bike corrals. When the idea was first proposed in Northeast Los Angeles, Highland Park, it was kind of foreign in Department of Transportation, and everyone out there know what to do with the concept of creating more bike parking spaces on the street and squaring them off, I think that it's working great. The first one we put up on York Boulevard, taking clutter off the streets, encouraging more bike use by saying, hey, if I ride my bike to that coffee shop, there certainly will be a parking spot waiting for me and won't have to look around for one. So I'm glad to see we're codifying some of those procedures for more biking corrals in the city. And again, I want to thank the planning department, because through these processes, I do think you're taking into account some of the public comments and using the wisdom and knowledge of the advocates who work on these issues day in and day out. So great job. On this, I would ask that it be a request from both Mr. Gregorian and I to get the report back on the city's compliance, as was raised by one of the speakers, with their own current regulations and on parking with our public facilities. If we get the report back to this committee, we will make that a new report back and not keep it as part of this process, because we don't want to hold one back from the other. So we could get that report back at some point in this committee as a request from Mr. Gregorian and I. So that's all I have to say, Mr. Gregorian. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, a couple. There are a number of design standards already contained within the text of the proposed ordinance. I didn't see anything that would touch upon the concern that was raised about the multifamily buildings and having the bicycle parking in front, although I suppose that the setback itself would serve that function to some extent. First of all, I'd like to know if that is an issue that you had considered at all, and also, if it isn't, is it something that we can take a look at prior to the time this comes back to council, so that we can have another look at that particular issue, hopefully with the benefit of the public impact statement that SCNC apparently submitted?
I definitely think we can take a look at that. I would say that the majority of the bicycle parking that we are asking for in residential buildings is long-term bicycle parking, which is going to be bicycle lockers or a bike cage or a bike room. So that's not going to be out in front. There is a small provision for a few bicycle racks. The problem with putting bicycle racks in the back of a building is that they don't get used. So that's kind of why that is usually discouraged. In all the design manuals I looked through when researching this ordinance, that was strongly discouraged. But we can definitely take a look at it if you would like to.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. I'm also curious about the relationship of the mandate of bicycle parking requirements together with the reduction in car parking requirements, and why we would do both of those things. Because it seems to me that if you have the mandate, you don't really need to create the additional incentive, if you will, to a developer of providing the reduction in the number of parking spaces. And I'm concerned that if we don't get that ratio right, it could very well result in, a business that puts up its bicycle parking, but it's not really likely to be well utilized, having a reduction in the amount of parking, which then causes spillover impacts.
So the importance of having a minimum parking requirement is that if we don't require it in all buildings, there's going to be places where people do want to bicycle to, and that's kind of the problem we have now. So if it is an option, there are going to be a lot of developers who...
No, I'm all for the mandate.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just saying, if you're going to do that, then why do we also need to have a reduction in the automotive parking requirement?
This is, we took our direction on this. There is already a provision in the zoning code that allows for this, and so we're basically just amending the current provision that's in the zoning code, and there was also a policy direction in the bicycle master plan asking us to look forward into this. There's also cities around the country that do allow this, and it's kind of an incentive if builders want to go beyond what we're requiring. So if we're requiring 10 spaces, but they want to put in 15, maybe they get a little bonus extra in their reduction in car parking.
Is that the way this is working, or is it that there is a reduction in parking, in automotive parking, that the developer qualifies for by meeting the mandate for bicycle parking?
The way it's worded is for every 4 spaces that they provide, they can reduce 1 car parking space.
So that's not in addition to what's already mandated. That includes the mandated amount.
Yes, it does. Yeah. I guess, yeah.
Okay, I've got a little bit of a concern about that, which I can explore with you between now and council. I'm not going to hold it up, but I want to understand that a little bit better before I...
I also have both for the record. Certainly, I think if I understand the question, it has to do with the concern of how this ordinance would coordinate with the previous ordinance to establish modified parking requirements, modified parking districts.
Not necessarily, or any parking requirement. If there's going to be a reduction in the amount of automotive parking spaces based on the number of mandated bicycle parking spaces, it seems to me we're taking 2 policy approaches to achieve the same objective. And I'm not sure that we need to do both. And if you do both, then you increase the likelihood, it seems to me, of having spillover parking problems. It could be that maybe I'm just not understanding this, but it seems to me that it's a little bit it's redundant to do both to some extent.
The other concern that was voiced to us is that we are increasing the amount of bicycle parking by quite an extent through this ordinance, and that will be providing an additional cost to developers, so they wanted some way to offset that cost.
Right. And there's a physical space limitation. I get that, but my point being that if you get that ratio wrong, you may not be fully utilizing the bicycle parking spaces, but you may then have eliminated very much needed automotive parking, which pushes the cars into surrounding areas. So that's a concern, Mr. Chair, which I can explore later before it gets to council, but I'm happy to move it forward now.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we will move forward with this item with the 2 amendments presented by the planning staff. One of them doing for the procedures on the bike crawl, the other one on the regulations related to the parks. So with that, in concurrence, Mr. Krikorian will move this, will adopt this item without objection and request the city attorney to draft the ordinance. Thank you. So ordered. Thank you very much, everyone.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just as a reminder, I would also like to have a report back on options for addressing that issue of bicycle parking in the front of multifamily residential buildings as well.
There's 2 report backs on that, on this item as well. Thank you. Thank you. Next item.
Next item is item 6, is a draft ordinance being transmitted by the Planning Commission. It has to do with residential floor area and creating a new supplemental use district within the boundaries of Studio City.
Mr. Chair, yes. I regret to have to say that after a year and a half of work on this agendized issue, there's been a recent change in circumstances since the last action on this, in that I have just recently purchased a home which will be my permanent residence that is in the area of the RFA that's before us today. So in order to avoid any argument that there could even be a potential for conflict of interest, I regret to say that I'm going to have to recuse myself from this matter.
Great. Thank you very much. We will have Mr. Krikorian excused, and this is the last item on the agenda, Mr. Krikorian, so
I'll be back for public comment.
We don't have any public comment, so you are duly excused if you wish, unless you, well, we could get you back here for adjournment of the motion, but do you have a public comment, sir?
I'll be back.
Okay, I don't have one here, sir. So
I can't.
And Mr. Krikorian cannot be here. And so with that, for public comment, no, on this issue, we have a number of public comments for this issue, but not the general public comment. But Mr. Krikorian indicated he will return after this. Welcome.
Councilman, good to see you. Tom Glick, Policy Planning Division, Planning Department.
Can I just need to request the city attorney if you could come here for a quick sidebar, and you could begin your presentation, and I'll...
Absolutely, no problem. Well, it's a shame the councilman left because I wanted to acknowledge his office's wonderful efforts in the creation of the final resolution of the RFA. But I am just presenting up until what Planning Commission did on this item exactly 1 year ago today, exactly 1 year ago today on September 1st, 2010. But let me go back a little further to the baseline mansionization ordinance that was adopted in June of 2008. When it was adopted, it created FARs in most single-family properties in flatland areas throughout the city of an FAR of 0.5 base with a bonus of up to 20% or 0.1 FAR. With some bonus requirements that you would need to achieve either proportional stories, front facades, or green building standards. It also established that communities, if they so choose, would create supplemental use districts, residential floor area supplemental use districts, overlays. And the specifications for an overlay were at least 100 acres, and initiated either by City Planning Commission, City Council, or, like most supplemental use districts, 75% of the signatures of affected property owners within the area. Well, it was the second one that was chosen, Councilwoman Wendy Gruhl, in September, 2 years ago, almost to this date, 2 years ago, September 2008, initiated a motion creating a residential floor, or requesting the Planning Department to prepare a residential floor area for Studio City. Most properties included R1, RE11, and RE20, exactly 3,936 properties, or 35 properties, so a little less than 4,000 properties were affected by this motion. The majority of the properties are zoned R1, approximately 3854, or exactly 3854, RE11, 68 lots, and 13 lots RE20. So Planning Department, in the years after that, 2008 and 2009, conducted the outreach and the background and the analysis and prepared the ordinance, which went to Planning Commission in February of 2010. And essentially it mirrored the same ordinance that was adopted for Sunland Tahunga, which lowered the base from 0.5 to 0.33 and lowered the bonus from 0.1 to 0.07. It was a simple staff report that went to Planning Commission. However, it wasn't simple in terms of the concerns of the community. At the Planning Commission, because Planning Commission was going to hold the public hearing, approximately 125 people came out either in support or opposition, pretty much equally in support as there were in opposition. Planning Commission didn't even address the issue. Several issues came up. The opposition felt that the BMO was sufficient, that 0.5, and the bonus of 0.1 was sufficient. The opposition felt that they needed this ordinance in effect immediately because the historic aspects of their Studio City community were being destroyed daily by single-family homes built in the 50s and the 40s and the 60s being demoed in place of McMansions or mansions. Planning Commission didn't act on this. Planning Commission felt that staff needed to go back and do more community outreach because that was a criticism of staff at that Planning Commission in February 2010. City Planning Commission asked Planning Department staff to go back and do additional outreach and refine the ordinance and come back with a refined ordinance. So Planning Department went out in March of 2010 and conducted a series of workshops, well, 2 workshops in the community, attended by approximately 200 people with similar concerns. We had as many people who came to the community in opposition to an RFA as there were in support of an RFA. So after 5 months of working with the communities, the workshops in March, and then working with the community in the council office, and let's remember 2 things. The RFA in Studio City is 3 council offices. The majority of the council office, or the majority of the properties are in Council District 2. However, this is also Council District 4 and Council District 5, which have small amounts of of single-family homes in their council district. So Council District 2 took the lead. And they really came in. They started in their office in January of 2010, which was a month before our public hearing. So they had a lot of catching up to do with what this was trying to accomplish, and they did a wonderful job. So they spent the next 5 months with the Planning Department and the community working on the recommendation to Planning Commission. We went back to Planning Commission in July of 2010 with a more refined and essentially a more detailed recommendation. It kept the original base of 0.33 that was established to lower the base FAR for baseline for the RFA for Studio City from 0.5 to 0.3. However, it allowed, depending on your lot size and your zoning, it allowed up to 4 bonuses and allowed R1 properties or different zone properties to establish a higher bonus level if they established more bonuses. Landscaping, front yard setbacks, detached garages, things of that nature. We allowed 11 new bonuses above the ones that were established in baseline, the 3 that were established in baseline, and allowed R1 properties, the majority of the properties that were zoned R1 and with properties or lot size less than 7,500, we gave them up to 4 bonuses and an ability to get back with the 4 bonuses to base with bonus of 0.53, which would have been essentially pretty close to what baseline established, but created a 4 bonus structure. And then it became similar to higher zone properties, R1 with greater lot areas, and then RE11, RE11 with larger properties, and then RE20 were allowed the bonuses, greater bonuses. Commission, at that public hearing, Commission essentially went with what staff recommended and established the ordinance with the revised bonus structure and the revised base based on the zoning and the lot size. Planning Commission on September 1st, 2010 issued their determination. So what's happened in the last year, Planning Department has had no involvement with this. It has been the communities, both in opposition and support, and the council office working on the compromise. Planning Commission's action is the last word I will say on this. But what has happened since is they have worked a compromise out that I believe has been supported by both the opposition and those in support. And it's a testimony, I mean, there's still a handful of what we went through in the last year of the hundreds of people that came out in support and opposition. It was a very passionate issue in the community for several months, and probably still is a very passionate issue. But it's a testimony to Studio City, because I've worked with Studio City for 15 years. It's a testimony to these people that they have worked out a compromise that will make both those in support and those in opposition somewhat pleased with the final result. It's hard because it was my intention here to speak and then hand this over to the council office. It really deserves the credit for the last year of brokering this compromise. But with that said, I will say the last act on this is Planning Commission's action on September 10th, September 1st, 2010. What I have seen, and I literally have seen this in the last few weeks, what I have seen and has been given to me essentially mirrors Planning Commission's action. So if this is what is recommended by your committee, then it is not going to alter what Planning Commission acted on, or Planning Commission's determination, and I think the Director of Planning can pretty much say this substantially complies with the Commission's action of September 2010. Sorry that was so long.
Thank you. Little public comment now. Joe Higgins. Joe Higgins. After Joe Higgins is Mildred Higgins.
Good afternoon, Honorable Councilman. I want to thank Mr. Glick, who put everything very succinctly so that you could follow the chronology of this event. I'd like to thank the council office for putting this together and working many hours with both sides to reach some sort of consensus that could be agreed upon. And I urge you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mildred Higgins. After Mildred is Rita Villa.
Yeah, my name is Mildred Higgins. I'm a 40-year resident of Studio City. I live on a lot that's 50 by 130, which means 6,500 square feet, which is the smaller of the lots in Studio City. I live in a street that runs 3 blocks from Moore Park and is stopped by the river. There is no through traffic, but we're impacted by the growth of the larger homes on the street. So I am familiar with the impact of what will be gained by your acceptance and support of this proposed ordinance for up to bonuses for those people. My whole idea in raising my family in Studio City was to maintain a quality of life for persons who choose to move into our neighborhood, live there for long periods of time. And for this, I ask your support of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Rita Villa. After Rita Villa is Lisa Sarkin.
Good afternoon. I fully support the RFA proposal that's been submitted by our councilman, the compromise position that was referred to by Tom Glick. I thank the councilman and his staff for their hard work in arriving at this proposal that has the support of the majority of the community. Our councilman said to me at one point that unless everyone was a little bit dissatisfied on both sides, he wouldn't have good, effective an ordinance to bring forward. And I think he has achieved that. I think everyone is slightly dissatisfied, but certainly recognizes the needs and desires of the other side and wants very much to see this move forward. I request that every effort be made to expedite the process so that this proposal comes before our city council as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa Sarkin. After Lisa is Ofer Bick.
Good afternoon, council member. This is Lisa Sarkin, Studio City Neighborhood Council. I'm the vice president and the chair of the Land Use Committee, and I am speaking for the Neighborhood Council today. This issue started at the 2005 by the Residents Association, and we have waited a very long time for this. The Studio City Neighborhood Council has issued several community impact statements, which you have received today, I hope. And the two that pertain to this particular issue would be Studio City Neighborhood Council supports the current Studio City Residential Floor Area Supplemental District, the RFA, as being presented to Plum. The RFA has been presented and accepted by the Studio City Neighborhood Council Board. Also, we issued a community impact statement in, let's see, where's that date? Well, I think it was February of 2010, where at the time we thought that after the CPC that we would be moving more quickly than we have been for this, since we've been waiting since 2005. But the board issued this particular community impact statement, and it is the board of the Studio City Neighborhood Council, in agreement with the South Valley Area Planning Commission, requests that Council Member Krikorian propose immediately an urgency clause to the Studio City Residential Floor Area District. We hope that your committee, well, you can pass this on, and we won't be stuck here coming in for another time at Plum. And we hope that the city attorney and the planning department, whatever they have to do, will do it as quickly as possible so that we can get this to the city council for a vote within the next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Ofer Bick. After Ofer Bick is Alan Diamond.
My name is Ofer Bick. I'm a homeowner in Studio City. The baseline mansionization ordinance states that an RFA must consist of a contiguous area of R1 or RE lots not separated by R3, R4 commercial or industrial zones. The key word is contiguous, and the proposed RFA stitches together some 13 or more neighborhoods. It's an illegal RFA. Read the BMO and it'll tell you that right there, and it'll be overturned ultimately by the courts the way it's currently constructed. The BMO is very specific. It says that an RFA must be contiguous, and this has taken all of Studio City, more than 4,000 homes, nearly 10,000 individuals living in that area, and stitched them all together, jumping over R3, R4 commercial and other zones. This idea that this is an emergency has been going on now for years. There is no emergency. There's virtually no construction going on now. There is a little bit of construction, but it's nothing like what it always was before. This ordinance will hurt the city of LA financially. It's damaging to the city. At the hearings that Mr. Glick spoke of, more than nearly 70% of the speakers spoke against this ordinance, and yet this is being shoved down our throat. There's other issues here. There's a balcony ordinance proposed within this RFA, and that balcony ordinance is clearly illegal if you read the BMO. The BMO is quite specific in defining residential floor area to include only areas that are confined within exterior walls and are covered by a roof. In this RFA, they've created a new definition for FAR that now includes exterior uncovered areas. In the case of balconies, balconies are an exterior area never imagined or intended to be defined as floor area as part of the BMO or under the building codes for that matter. Secondly, an RFA under the BMO can be created to regulate square footage, not design. This proposal regulates the design of all balconies regardless of square footage. It's blatantly illegal under the BMO, and that's ironic because the RFA is under the BMO. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alan Diamond. After Alan Diamond is Barry Johnson.
Here I am. Thank you, Council Member, for the time to speak to you. I'm the president of the Studio City Residents Association. This is my 4th year going in, and I inherited this way back when, but we've been working diligently to come to some compromise, and we have met with the council member, and we've also met with the people who were opposed to what we were trying to do. We have met, and they're here today. Scott Roulette and I met, and we had coffee, hammered out some points that we could agree on, some we couldn't agree on, and finally we came to 2 sticking points, I think, and we went back to council office, Carlo in particular, and asked, we're stuck, and the council office, in addition to everything else they had done to move us forward, had resolved it. And what you see here today is a compromise, and as it's been said, we have little sticking points we're not happy with, but I know the community can live with this. And our community, the Residents Association, we have over 900 households, and if you double that, we end up by having somewhere about 1,800 members, and the majority of which support this, and we hope that you will treat this with some urgency, move it forward, and finally that we can move on with our lives and produce and keep our community as we know it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barry Johnson. After Barry Johnson, Sue Taylor.
Barry Johnson, Studio City. I think you'll find the dissenting views expressed this afternoon are coming from spec builders. The one you've already heard, he's built at least one huge house in Studio City. Yeah, it's on record. But anyway, I would personally like to thank Barbara Monahan Burke, who 7.5 years ago started this effort, in a grassroots effort in Studio City. Our neighborhoods were beginning to be encroached upon by these huge mansions. These are neighborhood homes that are 17 to 27% FAR for the most part. In fact, probably over 95% were 10 years ago. We are still over 90% of the 17 to 27% FAR. And without Barbara and what she got going 7.5 years ago, we wouldn't be here today. And I'm thank you for her efforts, and I'm only sorry that it took us this long to get there, and that she's since moved out of state, so she can't be here to realize this. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue Taylor. After Sue Taylor is Ben DiBenedetto.
Mine is so much easier than his.
Taylor, yeah, how much easier? Maybe Smith is easier than Taylor. But.
Exactly. Thank you so much for your time today. First, I wanted to thank Councilmember Krikorian's office and his staff, particularly Caro and Adrien, and previously Daniel as well, who worked on this, as well as the city planning staff, Tom Glick and Priya, for the tremendous effort that they all put into listening to all sides on this matter and supporting the community and coming together to work out a reasonable compromise for the Studio City RFA. Inherent in any compromise is the fact that no one side or person ended up with exactly what they had hoped going into this. Although I personally had supported no RFA, I feel that this is an improved plan and much more balanced. There is no doubt that this has been a difficult and contentious process that has taken a toll on our community. And I hope that the city will take note and on future issues find ways to eliminate some of the problems and communication difficulties that created so much community frustration. However, the many months of hard work and discussion that ensued after that CPC meeting in February 2010 helped to more accurately identify the key solvable issues that initially ignited this highly emotional topic. And as a result of that tremendous effort, the initial proposal had been developed into a far better and more well-reasoned plan that thoughtfully addresses the predominant concerns of the homeowners on both sides of this issue. It is heartening to see a few community leaders could courageously step up and come together to help identify salient issues and then work together to find the middle ground. And although there will never be complete community agreement on this issue, this final proposal is one I feel best satisfied the majority of stakeholder concerns. Finally, I want to once again thank Councilmember Krikorian's staff for their patience and willingness to listen and help gather consensus to bring this process where it is today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben.
You did quite well, and thank you again. I earlier identified myself as a board member of the Studio City Neighborhood Council. I want to be clear that I am not here to speak on behalf of the Neighborhood Council. I'm here as a stakeholder. I own a home in Studio City. I'm a partner in a real estate firm in Studio City, and the RFA, as you know and have heard, has been a hot-button issue for a very long time. Initially, my feeling was that it wasn't vetted properly. There were others that felt the same way. There were some that had positions against an RFA altogether, whether it was vetted properly or not. And as you can tell, we have still feelings of differences of opinion on this RFA and also on the amendments. I was part of and still am part of Studio City against the RFA. However, I am very much for the amended version of the RFA. We worked long and hard to get the best possible situation we could for our community. There are a lot of people in our community that are disgusted and tired of overbuilding, and some design measures seem to be necessary to satisfy the bulk of the community, even though some of us have differences of opinion, and some of those opinions are valid in my mind and in the minds of others. I'd like to thank the council office, CD2. Councilman Krikorian did a tremendous job with this. This was a very difficult issue. His staff, Daniel Brummer, who has since left, I'm sure you know, Caro and Adrien have done spectacular work. Alan Diamond and the Residents Association were quite cooperative over a very long period of time, and the people, Sue Taylor and Scott Ulett, who I'm sure you're going to hear from, and others from our side worked long and hard, and I hope that you will move this amended version of the RFA forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Douglas Humphreys. After Douglas Humphreys is Scott Onolet.
Hi, I'm Douglas Humphreys. I'm an architect. I'm also a stakeholder in Studio City. Our family's owned our house since 1958. There's several issues with this RFA that I still think are not well written, but I've given up on most of that because of what you've heard so far. This compromise seems to be something that they feel that they can move forward with. But there's one issue within this thing that it's kind of an affront to architectural history in its entirety. It's this balcony issue that was mentioned. And not only are they treating floor area, balcony as floor area, but if you do use the limited type of balcony that this measure allows, it limits your ability to use some of the other bonuses to create more actual interior floor space. So if you want to have a balcony, you kind of have a double penalty of square footage. So that's one issue, but let's see. I want to prevent more poorly written ordinances going into effect, hampering architects from trying to give good design solutions to people. We've already had the Hillside Ordinance, which was somewhat fixed recently, but over 20 years ago when that thing was passed, it created boxy hillside residences. It made it so an architect couldn't design a house that stepped down the hill and maintained a low profile. And it was stupid and poorly written, and this is another example of that. Also, the retaining wall ordinance that they're now trying to fix, which also prevented somebody from doing small retaining walls, terracing up a hill or something. This is just another example of another poorly written and thought out idea.
Thank you.
I don't.
Any final thoughts?
Can I say anything else?
Just if you could wrap it up, please.
Okay. Well, the whole drive behind this is supposed to be privacy, but it's a completely false sense of privacy. If your neighbor wants to spy on you, he can look through his window behind a curtain and spy on you. Most people don't go out on their balconies to spy on a neighbor. Most people, it's an internal thing. They open the doors to let the air and sunshine in, the plants on their balconies. They maybe sit out there and read a magazine or something and drink a cup of coffee, but they don't go out there to spy on their neighbors. And it's just a complete fallacy if you think once you have a new two-story house next to your one-story house that you're now going to have some sort of privacy because there's not a balcony that was created in a traditional sense. It does allow certain types of balconies, but nothing that... It's inhibiting breaking up the volume of a two-story house. It's just hampering design. It's going to create worse-looking volumetric buildings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Onolet.
Hi, my name is Scott Willett. I'm a homeowner in Studio City, and my home is affected by the RFA, and thank you, sir, for hearing us today. I was one of the co-founders of Studio City Against RFA. I was formerly opposed to this RFA, but I now support the council office amended RFA. This amended RFA was heavily negotiated. I personally worked on it directly with Alan Diamond of SERA and with the council office. In crafting this RFA, Sue Taylor and I, who was my co-founder of Studio City Against RFA, we represented hundreds of homeowners. We brought together, the planning department, the council office, custom home builders, top architects, engineers, contractors, and other real estate professionals to put this RFA together. We took an approach and say, how can we make big homes better? And I believe the council office amended RFA achieves that goal. So I'm here in support. I want to thank the council office, Councilman Krikorian, his staff, Adrien, Caro, Daniel, also the planning staff, Tom Glick and Priya. They were all very, very helpful and wonderful to work with in coming up with the balanced RFA. So I think it's time we get this passed. However, this is a heavily negotiated document from the council office, so there shouldn't be any further changes, hopefully, and hopefully no further restrictions. But this is a good thing. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Last is Adrian Nazarian. Now, Adrian, before you go on, I was under the impression that once a council member is recused, that includes staff, and that's why I asked our city attorney, but apparently the council on these items, city attorney's office has opined that staff may testify.
I did speak with the city attorney's office, and we asked if it's okay to come in and speak on behalf of the community.
That's right, and it's independent of anything the councilman is doing, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm here on my own, not at the direction of the councilman.
Oh, okay. Got that.
With that, Adrien Nazarian, Chief of Staff for Council District 2, 200 North Spring Street. Honorable Chair, as you have heard from planning staff, this matter is of great concern to the community and to our council office. We have received more than 800 different community correspondences on this matter, which our staff has been dedicated to solving for more than a year. This was an issue that stimulated great debate and showcased how wonderfully passionate Studio City is on these citywide matters. Our office has been working closely with the community, some of whom are here today, since the day we assumed office, on an equitable solution to an issue that used to showcase two competing viewpoints. Now I am proud to say that because of our hard work and the dedication of the community, we've arrived at a consensus ordinance which is reflected by the amendments presented today. These are the amendments that you should have with you also. As you've already heard, the community overwhelmingly supports these amendments, including those from the Studio City Residents Association, Studio City Neighborhood Council, and the organization known as the group known as the Studio City Against RFA. I want to thank all the community members who are here today and whose hard work on this issue has led to this great policy. I respectfully ask that this item be moved as a chair's recommendation with the proposed amendments with instructions to the Planning Department and the City Attorney's Office that they prepare a final ordinance to council within 30 days. Thank you so much, and thanks for all your work.
Thank you. That is our final speaker. On this item, I have one question, and that is the item raised by one of the public speakers on balconies. Staff still here on Planning Department? Oh, there you are. It's considered as part of the RFA. But both throughout our code, do we consider balconies part of RFAA?
Only if they're covered.
Pardon me?
Only if they're covered. Only if they're covered balconies.
Only if they're covered balconies?
Yeah, only if they're covered.
Okay. So is this being consistent with the rest of our code, the way this is being proposed, and if it is, why are we approaching it differently?
Well, I'm glancing at the new ordinance, the amendments that by the way, Tom Glick with City Planning. I'm glancing at it. I don't see any reference to balconies being considered floor area. The speaker might want to point out to me where it states that. Because
so we'll prepare that before, we'll deal with that before we get the full ordinance. We have this has come back. So I just want to raise that issue. I wasn't aware of whether that is correct or not. So
Can I
Sure.
I just wanted to acknowledge it's Priya Mahendale, which was my staff person on this project, is the planning staff that did the majority of the work on this project. So I am just carrying the football over the goal line.
Okay, so with that, as the chair's recommendation to full council, we would ask that the city attorney prepare the ordinance and adopt the planning department recommendations. Now, this is going to council.
No, this is, the recommendation for the city attorney to prepare.
That comes back here. So that, like the other ordinances, the other items today, we are requesting the city attorney to prepare the ordinance, and we are adopting the recommendations by the planning department. So those come back as well, this one.
Right, and in addition, Councilman, you may want to adopt the amendments submitted by Council District 2.
And adopt the amendments as submitted. So we will move those forward. And as I mentioned, when the city attorney brings back that ordinance, that's another opportunity for everyone to review whether you agree or disagree on those items there.
And this item goes to the council as a chair's recommendation.
Okay, that's my question.
Yes.
Why would this one go to full council?
Because you need the council authority, or in essence, you need the council to instruct the city attorney to prepare the ordinance.
Okay, the others, we had a quorum, and so those do not need, I see, okay. That's the difference. Got it. So this will go to full council.
Yes.
So if we could have this item go to full council and get this back as soon as possible. Thank you. So ordered.
I believe you have public comment, Council.
We have no other public comment, general public comment. Mr. Krikorian, if he could be told that item has been moved and no public comment, I will adjourn this meeting. Okay, thank you.